Imagine the shock of walking into your corner office on a crisp Boston morning, the skyline glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows like a promise of stability, only to have your boss, some slick 30-something in a tailored suit, hand you a pink slip with a fake sympathetic smile. "Margaret, we've got to streamline operations," he says, his voice dripping with corporate BS, as if decades of blood, sweat, and late nights crunching numbers on Wall Street meant zilch. At 65, after grinding it out for over 30 years in finance, building portfolios that made millionaires out of moguls, you're suddenly redundant, tossed aside like yesterday's Wall Street Journal, your heart pounding in your ears, the room spinning as memories flood in. Husband's betrayal, his sudden heart attack, leaving you a widow with nothing but echoes in an empty brownstone. How do you even breathe when the world you've built crumbles in one gut-wrenching meeting? But what if that devastating blow was the spark that ignited something fiercer? Something no one saw coming? Before we continue, take a moment to share where you're listening from and subscribe to the Ageless Bold Stories channel. I truly love seeing our stories reach across so many places and hearts. Together, we're creating a space where every season of life still holds its own wonder, its own turning point. Now, let's ease ourselves back into the story. Margaret Hayes sat there in that sterile conference room, the hum of the air conditioning mocking her stunned silence. The Boston financial district buzzed outside, traders yelling into phones, screens flashing stock tickers like frantic heartbeats. But inside, time froze. Her boss, Derek, avoided her eyes, shuffling papers as if this was just another deal closing. "It's not personal, Marge," he muttered, using that nickname she hated, like she was some outdated auntie. "The firm's restructuring. We need fresh blood to keep up with the fintech wave." Fresh blood? At 65, she felt the sting like a slap. Ageism wrapped in buzzwords. She'd seen the reports trickling in from places like the OECD and Milken Institute, talking about how women over 60 were being shoved out of finance amid rising discrimination, their experience dismissed as outdated, while younger hotshots got the glory. Her chest tightened, a wave of fury and despair crashing over her. This wasn't just a job loss, it was erasure. 30 years of outsmarting market crashes, negotiating deals that saved the firm millions, all reduced to a severance check and a cardboard box for her desk knickknacks. She drove home in a daze, the Charles River blurring past her windshield under a grey autumn sky. Her modest brownstone in Back Bay welcomed her with creaking floors and the faint scent of lavender from the sachets she'd tucked away after burying Tom 2 years prior. Tom's affair had shattered her first, whispers from colleagues about his younger secretary, the late nights he claimed were client dinners. Then the heart attack hit like a thunderbolt, leaving her alone with the mortgage and a hollow ache that no amount of wine could fill. Slumping onto the worn leather couch, Margaret stared at the framed photo of them on their honeymoon in Cape Cod. Waves crashing behind their smiling faces. Tears welled up, hot and unbidden. "Why now, Tom?" she whispered to the empty room. "After everything, they just discard me?" The emotional peak hit her like a tidal wave, raw grief mixing with rage, her fists clenching until her nails dug into her palms. She wasn't just mourning a job, she was grieving the life she'd sacrificed, the dreams deferred for stability that turned out to be smoke. But in that darkness, a spark flickered. Scrolling through her phone that night, wrapped in a cozy afghan her late mother had knitted, Margaret stumbled on viral stories, buzzing across LinkedIn and TikTok, tales of boomer women flipping the script, like that engineer Tracy Cho, who exposed tech's diversity gaps in her 30s, or whispers of rejected founders turning setbacks into billions. One post from Ashley Mayer talked about generational tailwinds, how AI was leveling the playing field for fresh thinkers, even late bloomers. "It's never too late," the caption read, and something stirred in Margaret's gut. She wasn't done. Hell no. With her severance burning a hole in her bank account, she packed up and headed south to Austin, Texas, the booming heart of tech innovation, where startups sprouted like bluebonnets in spring. The drive was a blur of highways and truck stops, but arriving in the vibrant city, with its eclectic mix of cowboy boots and coders sipping craft beer under live oaks, felt like breathing fresh air. Setting up shop in a co-working space downtown, surrounded by the buzz of young entrepreneurs, hammering away on laptops amid exposed brick walls and ping-pong tables, Margaret poured her finance expertise into Hayes Innovations. It was a stealth AI startup, crunching financial data to predict market biases and risks for mid-sized banks. No fanfare, just her at a cluttered desk, coding late into the night with the Austin skyline twinkling outside, the distant strum of live music from 6th Street fueling her. Her tool was a game changer, spotting trends like the rising wave of female-led startups amid 2024's empowerment buzz. The kind RBC Wealth reports were warning about gendered ageism hindering women's security. Within months, she quietly snapped up stakes in 4 fintech firms. The second emotional peak surged as she closed her first acquisition. Pure exhilaration, her hands shaking as she signed the papers, realizing she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. "Take that." "Derek," she muttered with a triumphant grin, the weight lifting off her shoulders like shedding an old skin. But the real coup was Nexus Finance, a rising star in analytics, where her son-in-law, Tyler, toiled as a mid-level analyst, clueless that his mother-in-law now held the reins. Margaret kept it all under wraps, her modest lifestyle unchanged. No flashy cars, just her reliable Subaru, and simple joys like morning walks along Lady Bird Lake, watching joggers and kayakers under the Texas sun. The secrecy added a thrill, but also a pang of isolation. As her portfolio grew, whispers of her AI's impact rippled through industry chats, companies crediting innovative algorithms for their edge, never knowing the mastermind was a 65-year-old widow who'd been written off. Yet, as success mounted, so did the cracks. Back in Boston for a family visit, Tyler's offhand comment over dinner, "Mum, you should relax, enjoy retirement," hit like a gut punch. The third emotional peak crested, a mix of pride in her hidden empire and searing hurt from being underestimated by her own blood. She smiled through it, but inside resentment brewed. How long could she keep this powerhouse life a secret before it exploded? And what would happen when the truth clawed its way out, especially with Olivia's wedding on the horizon? Yet, as success mounted, so did the cracks. Back in Boston for a family visit, Tyler's offhand comment over dinner, "Mom, you should relax, enjoy retirement," hit like a gut punch. The third emotional peak crested, a mix of pride in her hidden empire and searing hurt from being underestimated by her own blood. She smiled through it, but inside, resentment brewed. How long could she keep this powerhouse life a secret before it exploded? And what would happen when the truth clawed its way out, especially with Olivia's wedding on the horizon? The flight back from Austin had been turbulent, much like Margaret's thoughts swirling in her head. Touching down at Logan Airport, the familiar chill of a New England fall wrapped around her like an old, scratchy sweater, comforting yet irritating. She grabbed her carry-on, a simple black roller bag that screamed practicality over flash, and hailed a cab to her Back Bay brownstone. The streets were alive with the usual Boston hustle. College kids in hoodies dodging puddles, the scent of roasted chestnuts from street vendors mixing with exhaust fumes. But as she unlocked her front door, the quiet hit her hard. No Tom to greet her with that crooked smile, no Olivia popping in for a quick chat. Just the echo of her footsteps on the hardwood floors and the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a relic from her parents' house in Quincy. Settling into her cozy kitchen nook, with its granite counters cluttered by unread mail and a half-empty coffee mug from before her trip, Margaret fired up her laptop. The screen glowed with the latest dashboards from Hayes Innovations, graphs spiking like fireworks, showing how her AI was nailing predictions on market biases. One report flagged a trending bias against female executives over 50 in fintech hiring, pulling data from Glassdoor reviews and EEOC filings. It reminded her of those viral LinkedIn posts she'd seen. Women sharing stories of being sidelined, tagged with hashtags like Sean Ageism, InTech, and Boomer Bosses. They're flipping the script, she murmured to herself, sipping black coffee that had gone lukewarm. Her tool wasn't just crunching numbers, it was spotting the cultural shifts like the 2024 surge in mompreneur, narratives on podcasts and Forbes articles, where ladies her age were ditching corporate chains for startup glory. Margaret felt a quiet thrill. Her creation was part of that wave, quietly empowering banks to diversify without even knowing. The wizard behind the curtain was a widow from Beantown, but the glow faded when her phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Family dinner tonight, Tyler's grilling steaks. Bring wine if you're not too busy with your project. The quotes around project stung like a paper cut. Margaret sighed, staring out the bay window at the maple trees shedding fiery leaves onto the sidewalk. Olivia, her only child, had always been a firecracker, sharp as a tack in her marketing gig at a downtown ad firm, where she pitched campaigns for trendy brands like athleisure lines and eco-friendly gadgets. In her mid-30s, with that sleek bob haircut and power suits that screamed, "I'm in charge," Olivia had inherited Tom's charisma, but none of his patience. The heart attack had hit her hard too, but instead of drawing closer, it seemed to push her further into cynicism, especially toward Margaret's grief-fueled hobby, as she called it. By evening, Margaret arrived at Olivia and Tyler's cozy colonial in the suburbs of Brookline, a bottle of Cabernet in hand. The house smelled like sizzling garlic and herbs, with the Patriots game humming on the TV in the background. Classic Sunday vibes. Tyler, a lanky guy in his late 30s with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, flipped steaks on the backyard grill, beer in hand. "Hey, mom-in-law, how's the Lone Star State treating you? Still tinkering with that app thing?" His tone was light, but the word tinkering made Margaret's jaw tighten. She forced a chuckle, handing over the wine. "Oh, keeping busy. Austin's got that weird mix of tech geeks and barbecue joints. Keeps me on my toes." Inside, Olivia was setting the table with those fancy linen napkins, her diamond engagement ring catching the light from the chandelier. "Mum, sit down before you keel over from jet lag," she said, rolling her eyes with that signature smirk. As they dug into the meal, juicy ribeyes, roasted potatoes, and a crisp salad, conversation flowed like it always did. Olivia ranting about a nightmare client, Tyler geeking out over some crypto trend he'd read on Reddit. But when Margaret casually mentioned a big data breakthrough she'd had, the room shifted. Olivia set her fork down with a clink. "Mom, seriously? You're not some Silicon Valley hotshot. This whole tech phase, it's cute, but come on. After Dad, the affair and everything. Maybe it's just grief talking. Stick to knitting or volunteering at the library. That's more your speed at this point." The words landed like a sucker punch, Margaret's fork hovering mid-air. She felt heat rise in her cheeks, a flash of betrayal sharper than Tom's infidelity. Grief fueled, as if her husband's messy end collapsing at his desk after months of lies about overtime with his assistant had turned her into some fragile relic. Olivia, honey, it's not just a phase, Margaret said softly, her voice steady despite the storm inside. I've built something real. It's helping companies spot biases, like those stories you see online about women getting pushed out. Tyler jumped in, ever the peacemaker with a side of condescension. Whoa, biases? Sounds heavy. But Mom, at your age, do you really want the stress? Retirement's calling. Golf, cruises, the good life. He grinned, but Margaret saw the pity in his eyes, the assumption that she was playing pretend in a world that had passed her by. She bit back the urge to spill everything, the acquisitions, the way Nexus Finance, Tyler's own employer, was thriving on her AI without a clue. Instead, she smiled through the digs, nodding as Olivia changed the subject to wedding plans. The Napa venue is booked, vineyards, string lights, the works. Just promise you won't bore everyone with tech talk, Mum. It's my day, not a TED talk. The laughter that followed felt like salt in the wound. Later, driving home under the sodium glow of streetlights, Margaret gripped the wheel tighter. Her phone pinged with a notification. Another viral TikTok, a 60-something woman sharing how she bootstrapped a business after divorce, captioned, "Flipping the script on ageism, one win at a time." It fueled her fire, but also deepened the ache. How could her own daughter, who scrolled those same feeds, dismiss her so easily? Back in her brownstone, Margaret poured a glass of the leftover Cabernet and sank into her armchair by the fireplace, the flames crackling like her unresolved thoughts. She opened her laptop again, diving into the data. Her AI was predicting a massive shift. With the 2024 empowerment buzz, think Sheryl Sandberg reboots and AARP campaigns highlighting late career pivots. Female-led fintech was exploding. Hayes Innovations was at the forefront. Her stakes in those 4 firms ballooning in value. But the secrecy weighed heavy. A late-night email from a Nexus exec praised their mystery algorithm for dodging a market dip. Clueless it was hers. Pride swelled, but so did isolation. They have no idea, she whispered to the empty room, tears pricking her eyes. Was it worth hiding to avoid rocking the boat, or was the boat already leaking, with Olivia's wedding set to be the storm that sank it? As the clock struck midnight, Margaret closed her eyes, the weight of unspoken triumphs pressing down. Little did she know, the threads of her secret empire were already weaving into the family's fabric, ready to unravel everything at the most unexpected moment. As the weeks blurred into months, Margaret found herself shuttling between Austin's buzzing tech scene and Boston's familiar grit, her double life pulling at her like a taut rubber band. The secrecy that once thrilled her now felt like a heavy coat in the sweltering Texas heat. Back home for another family weekend, she stared at her calendar app on her phone. The date circled in red, Olivia's wedding, just 3 months away in the scorching Napa Valley, summer of 2024. The thought sent a mix of excitement and dread churning in her gut. How could she celebrate her daughter's big day while swallowing the barbs that came with every visit? But she pushed it down, focusing on the wins. Her latest acquisition had just closed, pumping more cash into Hayes Innovations than she'd ever dreamed. Little did Olivia know that windfall was quietly covering a chunk of the wedding costs, from the floral arches to the open bar. Margaret wired the money anonymously through a third-party planner, telling herself it was just her way of showing love without the drama. The drive out to Brookline that Friday evening felt longer than usual, traffic crawling along the Mass Pike like a sluggish river. Margaret cranked up the radio. Some classic rock station playing Springsteen's Born to Run. The lyrics hitting a little too close to home. She pulled up to Olivia and Tyler's place, just as the sun dipped behind the leafy suburbs, casting long shadows over the manicured lawns and picket fences. The air smelled like fresh cut grass and charcoal. Tyler was at it again with the grill, his go-to for family nights. "Mom, you made it," Olivia called from the porch, waving a glass of rosé, her sundress fluttering in the breeze. She looked every bit the bride-to-be, glowing with that pre-wedding buzz, her phone perpetually in hand, scrolling through Pinterest boards of vineyard venues and rustic centerpieces. Inside, the house was a whirlwind of wedding chaos, swatches of fabric scattered on the dining table, invitation samples stacked like a Jenga tower, and a laptop open to a spreadsheet titled Napa Nuptials Budget. Tyler poked his head in from the backyard, tongs in hand. "Steaks are almost done. Medium rare, right, Mum?" He grinned that boyish smile, but Margaret caught the subtle eye roll from Olivia, as if her mum's presence was a minor hiccup in their perfect evening. They settled around the kitchen island for appetizers, cheese board with those fancy artisanal crackers Olivia loved, chatting about the usual, Red Sox prospects, the latest Netflix binge, and of course the wedding. "We've got 180 on the guest list now," Olivia said, popping an olive into her mouth. Tyler's work buddies are all RSVPing yes, tech bros galore. The venue's this gorgeous vineyard spot, rolling hills, sunset views. It's gonna be epic. Margaret nodded, sipping her wine, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. She was genuinely happy for her daughter. Olivia deserved this joy after the rough patch with Tom's death. But as the conversation shifted, the storm clouds gathered. Tyler, ever the know-it-all from his analyst gig at Nexus, launched into a rant about the latest tech trends. "You wouldn't believe this AI stuff blowing up," he said, waving his beer bottle for emphasis. "It's all about predictive analytics now, spotting biases in hiring, market shifts. Our team's using this killer tool that's saving us a fortune on bad calls. But it's complicated, Mom. Not like those basic apps people fiddle with at home." He leaned in, mansplaining like she was a kid learning to tie her shoes. "See, it's about big data, algorithms crunching petabytes. Not something you pick up overnight." Margaret's grip tightened on her glass. Here he was explaining her own invention back to her, clueless that Hayes Innovations AI was the killer tool propping up his department. She could picture the dashboards at Nexus, her code humming in the background, forecasting those very trends he was yapping about, like the 2024 empowerment wave, where female-led startups were exploding thanks to viral stories on platforms like Forbes and LinkedIn. Reports from McKinsey were all over it. Women over 50 reclaiming space in tech, turning ageism into ammunition. Her tool was spotting it early, helping firms like Nexus diversify before the backlash hit. But instead of spilling the beans, she bit her tongue, the metallic taste of restraint familiar by now. "Sounds fascinating, Tyler," she said evenly. "I've been reading up on some of that myself." Olivia snorted, setting down her phone with a thud. "Oh, come on, Mum, don't start with your little app thing again. We're talking real tech here, not whatever hobby you've got going in Austin. Save it for your knitting circle." The words hung in the air like smoke from the grill, Tyler chuckling awkwardly as he flipped the steaks outside. Margaret felt the heat rise, not from the summer evening, but from deep inside, a simmer turning to boil. Little app thing, if only they knew she was secretly footing part of this wedding extravaganza from her hobby's booming profits. The vineyard deposit, her wire transfer, the custom invitations. covered by a quiet dividend from one of her stakes. She smiled through it, but her mind raced. How many more digs before she snapped? Dinner unfolded on the patio under string lights, the sizzle of steaks mingling with crickets chirping in the backyard. They dug in, plates piled high with grilled veggies and buttery corn on the cob, but the tension crackled like the embers in the fire pit. Olivia pulled out her wedding binder, a massive thing bursting with fabric samples and vendor contracts, thrusting it toward Margaret. Look at these centerpieces, wildflowers with succulents, totally Insta-worthy. But Mom, promise me, at the reception, don't bore the guests with your tech talk. It's not like you're Mark Zuckerberg or something. Tyler's boss, Victor, will be there, plus a bunch of his fintech crowd. We want classy, not quirky. She air-quoted quirky, her eyes flicking to Tyler for backup. He nodded, mouth full. Yeah, keep it light, Mum. No need to dive into data stuff. These guys are sharks. Deals, mergers, the real deal. Margaret poked at her potato, the fork scraping the plate. Sharks? She'd outswum them all, acquiring firms under their noses. Her AI was even now analysing the rising trends in female-led startups, predicting a boom amid the social media frenzy. TikToks of boss babes in their 60s going viral, inspiring waves of empowerment. But here at this table, she was reduced to the quirky mum. Of course, honey, she murmured, her voice steady but her heart pounding. It's your day. As the evening wound down with coffee and store-bought pie, Margaret excused herself to the guest room upstairs. The walls were papered in soft florals, a remnant of when Olivia was a teen, posters of boy bands long gone. Lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan whirring lazily, she scrolled through her phone. A notification popped. Another industry article praising anonymous AI innovations in fintech. Her work cited without credit. Pride mixed with frustration, a step closer to the breaking point. The wedding loomed like a powder keg. What if one slip, one conversation ignited it all? She drifted off uneasy, the seeds of drama planted deep, ready to sprout under Nappy's relentless sun. Alone in the guest room that night, Margaret couldn't shake the echoes of dinner's barbs, but as dawn crept through the floral curtains, she knew she had to head back to her own space. The drive to her Back Bay brownstone the next morning was a quiet one, the radio droning, talk shows about the stock market's latest jitters. Ironic, given how her AI had predicted that dip weeks ago. She pulled into her narrow parking spot, the crunch of leaves under her tires, a reminder that fall was deepening, much like the rift in her family. Unlocking the door, she stepped into her modest apartment, the air carrying that familiar mix of coffee grounds and old books. It wasn't flashy, just a 2-bedroom with high ceilings, a bay window overlooking the bustling street, and walls lined with shelves of finance tomes and framed photos from better days. She dropped her overnight bag by the coat rack and headed straight for the kitchen, brewing a fresh pot of joe to chase away the fog. Sinking into her worn armchair by the window, laptop balanced on her knees, Margaret dove back into the data that grounded her. The screen lit up with dashboards from Hayes Innovations, colourful graphs pulsing like a heartbeat. One tab showed real-time metrics from Nexus Finance, Tyler's firm, where her AI tool was quietly orchestrating miracles. It had flagged a potential hiring bias last quarter, prompting subtle shifts that boosted their diversity scores and, in turn, their stock by 8%. Anonymous genius, one internal memo called it, praising the third-party algorithm for dodging regulatory heat amid the growing scrutiny on ageism in tech. Margaret leaned back, a wry smile tugging at her lips. If only Tyler knew his latest promotion, rumoured in a company newsletter she'd skimmed. stemmed from efficiencies her code had unlocked. The tool was analysing trends like a pro, pulling from vast datasets on social media sentiment, EEOC complaints, and market reports. It predicted the 2024 empowerment surge, where women over 50 were launching ventures at record rates. Fueled by podcasts like The Gary V Show and articles in Harvard Business Review decrying silver ceiling barriers. But the victories felt hollow in the solitude of her apartment. The sting of isolation wrapped around her like the chill seeping through the drafty windows. She set the laptop aside and paced to the kitchen, pouring another mug, the steam rising like her unresolved frustrations. Olivia's words replayed on loop. "Little app thing." Tyler's condescending nod. Even the anonymous wedding contributions, $10,000 wired last week for the band and photographer, felt like a secret bandage over a gaping wound. Why hide it all? Pride? Fear of upstaging her daughter? Or deeper, the ache from Tom's betrayal, when he'd dismissed her ambitions years ago, saying, "Stick to the office, Marge. The big leagues are for the boys." She'd swallowed that too, focusing on raising Olivia. But now at 65, she was done being the background player. As evening fell, the apartment grew dim, streetlights flickering on outside like hesitant stars. Margaret flicked on a lamp and grabbed her phone, collapsing onto the couch with a throw blanket. A late-night scroll through TikTok pulled her in. The algorithm knew her too well, serving up videos of overlooked women striking back. One clip featured a silver-haired entrepreneur in her 60s. Caption: "Fired at 58, built $1 million app by 62. My mompreneur, ageism sucks." The woman laughed into the camera, sharing how viral stories on platforms like Instagram had inspired her pivot, turning rejection into rocket fuel. Comments flooded in. "You're my hero." "This is the 2024 vibe. Boomers booming." Margaret's thumb hovered, a spark of solidarity igniting. Another video, a panel from a TEDx talk, discussing how AI was democratizing tech for late bloomers, with stats from Deloitte, reports showing women-led startups outperforming in resilience amid economic shakes. The content fueled her resolve, her chest swelling with a fierce determination. She wasn't alone in this fight. The trends were shifting, whispers turning to roars. Her own tool was part of it, spotting those biases, empowering firms to hire more silver talent, as one Forbes piece called it. But as the videos played on, doubt crept in like shadows lengthening across the room. Should she spill the beans before the wedding? Imagine dropping the truth over brunch. "By the way, kids, that little app owns half of Tyler's company." The fantasy brought a chuckle, but reality sobered her. Olivia's eyes would widen, Tyler's jaw drop. But then what? Accusations of secrecy, hurt feelings exploding like fireworks at the reception. No, the wedding was sacred. Her daughter deserved the spotlight without Mum's bombshell stealing it. Margaret wrestled with the decision, her mind a tug of war between vindication and peace. Opting for silence felt like the right call. For now. "Let them underestimate me a little longer," she whispered to the empty room, the words hanging in the air like a promise. Yet as she powered down her devices and headed to bed, the internal storm raged on. The apartment's quiet amplified her thoughts. Flashbacks to family dinners where Tom's charm had masked his dismissals. Olivia absorbing that vibe without realizing. Margaret slipped under the covers, the soft hum of city traffic. Outside a lullaby, but sleep came fitfully. Dreams mixed with data streams, graphs of rising trends, faces of viral women warriors, and Olivia's mocking laugh echoing through virtual halls. By morning, resolve hardened. She'd keep the peace, but the powder keg was primed. One wrong spark at the wedding and everything could ignite. Little did she know, Victor Lang, Tyler's sharp-eyed boss, had already caught wind of whispers about Hayes' innovations in industry circles, setting the stage for a revelation that would upend it all under Napa's golden vines. The wedding day arrived like a freight train, barreling through Margaret's carefully constructed walls of secrecy and resolve. She'd flown out to California a few days early, helping with last-minute touches at the Napa Valley vineyard, stringing fairy lights along the trellises, tasting the caterer's Pinot Noir pairings, all while keeping her Hayes Innovations empire tucked away like a hidden ace. The venue was straight out of a rom-com, rolling hills blanketed in golden vines under a relentless summer sun, the air thick with the sweet scent of ripening grapes and fresh-cut flowers. Tents billowed in the gentle breeze, tables set with crisp white linens and rustic centerpieces of succulents and wildflowers, just as Olivia had obsessed over. Margaret had wired another anonymous chunk for the string quartet, telling herself it was worth it to see her daughter beaming in that lace gown, veil trailing like a dream. But as guests trickled in 180 strong, a mix of family from Boston, Tyler's tech crowd from the Bay Area, and Olivia's ad world pals, the undercurrent of dread from those family dinners resurfaced. Victor Lang, Tyler's boss at Nexus, had RSVP'd, yes. Margaret had spotted his name on the seating chart, a potential landmine she hoped to sidestep. By mid-afternoon, the ceremony unfolded flawlessly under a floral arch, the efficient droning about love's enduring vines, poetic, if a bit on the nose for Napa. Olivia looked radiant, her arm linked with Tyler's as they exchanged vows, tears glistening in the sunlight. Margaret sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, a swell of maternal pride pushing back the shadows. "She's happy," she whispered to herself, watching the kiss seal the deal amid cheers and thrown petals. But as the crowd migrated to the reception area, cocktail hour with charcuterie boards and bubbly flowing like the nearby Russian River, the buzz turned personal. Guests mingled under shady oaks, laughter echoing off the hills, while a jazz band played soft standards in the background. Margaret circulated politely, her simple navy dress blending in, a pearl necklace from Tom her only flourish. She chatted with aunts about the weather, uncles about the Red Sox's lousy season, steering clear of Tyler's work buddies, clustered by the bar, their conversations laced with shop talk about AI disruptions and market biases. As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow over the long banquet tables, the MC, a bubbly cousin from Olivia's side, tapped the microphone for toasts. "All right, folks, grab your glasses, time to roast and boast." The crowd settled, clinking silverware quieting as the best man kicked things off with harmless jabs at Tyler's golf swing. Laughter rippled like waves through the vineyard, the atmosphere light and fizzy from the champagne. Then came Olivia's bestie, Sarah, a sharp-witted graphic designer in a flowy maxi dress, mic in hand with a mischievous grin. "Okay, I can't let this slide without shouting out the mother of the bride," she started, her voice carrying over the speakers. "Margaret's been on this wild tech adventure lately. Who knew boomers could go viral like that? I mean, starting a startup at her age? Goals, right? Or is it just TikTok brain?" The crowd chuckled, a few oohs mixing in as heads turned toward Margaret. She forced a grin, her cheeks flushing under the makeup she carefully applied that morning in her hotel room mirror. Sarah leaned into it, winking dramatically. "We've all seen those videos, grandmas turning into influencers overnight, hawking essential oils or whatever. But Margaret's out here coding or apping. Whatever it is, here's to keeping busy instead of bingo nights." More laughter erupted, glasses clinking in mock salute. Margaret's heart pounded like a drum in her chest. the sun suddenly feeling oppressive, sweat beading at her neckline. She glanced at Olivia, hoping for a save, but her daughter was giggling along, raising her flute with the rest. The whispers started then, subtle at first, guests murmuring about the latest ageism scandals, trending on LinkedIn, like that viral thread from a fired exec, exposing how firms sidelined legacy talent for Gen Z whiz kids. Did you see that post from the AARP forum? Someone nearby muttered. Women over 60 getting the boot left and right. It's brutal out there. But Sarah wasn't done. Seriously though, Margaret, props for the hustle. In a world where everyone's pivoting to podcasts or Peloton, you're out here chasing Silicon Valley dreams. Just don't forget the yoga mat. It's easier on the joints. The punchline landed, the tent erupting in applause and guffaws. Margaret's smile froze, her hands clasped tightly in her lap under the tablecloth. The emotional hit was visceral, a mix of humiliation and quiet rage bubbling up, flashbacks to Tom's dismissive laughs about her career ambitions, flickering like old film reels. Why here now, on this perfect day? She scanned the faces, Tyler smirking awkwardly, his boss, Victor, watching with a neutral expression from a nearby table, phone in hand as if checking emails. Little did she know he'd been digging into those industry whispers about Hayes Innovations, a name popping up in his feeds amid the fintech buzz. Then Olivia grabbed the mic, her veil swept back, cheeks flushed from wine and excitement. Thanks, Sarah, that was gold. And yeah, Mum's definitely on an adventure. Chasing dreams at your age? We've all seen those cringy influencer pivots on our feeds. Boomers going from bridge club to boardroom. Maybe try yoga instead, Mum. It's less ambitious. The crowd roared again, a few hears from the tech bros. Margaret's pulse thundered in her ears, her forced grin straining as whispers amplified the latest scandals. Remember that LinkedIn blow-up last week? Exec called out her firm for age discrimination, trending like crazy. She wanted to stand, to correct them, to reveal how her little app was the very tool flipping those biases on their head. But she stayed seated, heart aching, the high-stakes reveal simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for its moment to erupt. As the laughter from Olivia's toast faded into scattered applause, the reception tent seemed to close in on Margaret, like a warm, suffocating hug she didn't want. The jazz band struck up again, a smooth saxophone riff, cutting through the murmurs, but it did little to drown out the chuckles rippling across the tables. Guests shifted in their seats, clinking glasses and shooting glances her way. Some amused, others pitying, like she was the quirky aunt at a family reunion who'd shown up in a clown costume. Margaret kept her chin up, smoothing the napkin in her lap with trembling fingers, the vineyard's golden hues blurring through unshed tears. The air hung heavy with the scent of grilled hors d'oeuvres and blooming jasmine from the centerpieces, but to her it all smelled like embarrassment. How had her daughter's special day turned into this public sideshow? She scanned the crowd, 180 faces, a sea of sundresses and button-downs, tech execs mingling with ad folks, all buzzing from the open bar. Victor Lang caught her eye for a split second, his brow furrowed as he typed on his phone, probably checking some market alert, oblivious to the storm brewing right under his nose. The chuckles morphed into a wave of condescending pats on the back as people started milling about during the break before dinner. An older uncle from Tom's side ambled over, his tie loosened from the heat, clapping her shoulder like she was a kid who just learned to ride a bike. "Oh, Margaret, good for you keeping busy with that tech stuff," he said, his breath minty from the gum he was chewing. "My sister started a little Etsy shop at your age, sells knitted scarves. Keeps the mind sharp, huh? Don't let the young'uns get you down." He chuckled again, winking as if sharing an inside joke, before wandering off to the bar for a refill. Margaret nodded politely, her throat tight, feeling like an exhibit in a zoo. "Thanks," she managed, but inside fury simmered. "Busy?" As if her empire, Hayes Innovations, with its AI revolutionizing fintech, was some hobby to fill empty afternoons. She'd built it from the ashes of her layoff and widowhood, crunching data late into Austin nights while these folks sipped cocktails. More approached, each one twisting the knife a bit deeper. A cousin from Boston, wineglass in hand, leaned in with that fake sympathetic smile. "Hey Marge, props for trying something new. I saw this TikTok the other day. Boomer lady turns her garage into a startup hub. Inspiring, but realistically, at our age, it's about staying active, not world domination, right?" The woman patted her arm, her rings cold against Margaret's skin, before drifting away to chat with a group of bridesmaids. Margaret's heart raced, a flush creeping up her neck. Our age? She was 65, not ancient history. Flashbacks hit her like punches. Tom's affair, his snide comments about her office drudgery, while he chased younger thrills. The Wall Street pink slip, Derek's oily grin as he called her redundant. And now this, reduced to a punchline at her own daughter's wedding. She excused herself to the edge of the tent, pretending to admire the vineyard views, the sun dipping low and painting the hills in fiery oranges. But her mind raced with quiet triumphs. The acquisitions, the way her AI was spotting trends like the viral 2024 wave of women over 50 smashing glass ceilings, stories flooding LinkedIn and podcasts that mirrored her own path. Worse came when she overheard Olivia confiding to a bridesmaid near the dessert table, their voices carrying on the breeze like unwelcome guests. Margaret had stepped away for a breather, lingering behind a floral partition where potted olive trees provided a sliver of privacy. Olivia's laugh tinkled, light and carefree. "God, can you believe Mum's whole midlife reboot? It's pathetic, really. After Dad's mess, the affair, the heart attack, she's out there pretending she's some tech mogul. Like, get real. We've been telling her to chill, maybe join a book club or something normal." The bridesmaid, Sarah, the one who'd started the toast, nodded, popping a chocolate-covered strawberry into her mouth. "Totally, I mean those cringy videos online, boomers thinking they're influencers. But hey, at least it's keeping her out of our hair instead of calling every day like some empty nester cliche." They giggled, clinking glasses, oblivious to Margaret frozen just feet away. The words sliced deep, twisting the knife with a cruelty that stole her breath. Pathetic? Midlife reboot? Margaret's fists clenched at her sides, nails digging into her palms as hot tears threatened to spill. This wasn't just teasing, it was a betrayal sharper than Tom's infidelity, coming from the daughter she'd raised single-handedly after his death. Flashbacks flooded again, late nights helping Olivia with homework while Tom was working late, scraping together college tuition from her finance salary. Now secretly funding this lavish wedding from her pathetic success. Her AI tool was powering firms like Nexus, predicting empowerment shifts that had viral stories exploding. Women like her turning rejection into empires, as seen in those AARP features and TED Talks, trending everywhere. Yet here she was the joke. Margaret stayed mum, slipping back into the crowd as the band announced dinner, her mind a whirlwind of hurt and defiance. How much more could she take before the truth burst out? As plates of grilled salmon and heirloom salads were served, the condescension continued in whispers. A tech bro from Tyler's circle sidled up during the main course, fork gesturing wildly. "Heard about your little project, Mrs. Hayes." Cute! My grandma started blogging recipes, keeps her sharp. But tech's a young man's game, you know. All that AI buzz, wild stuff. He laughed, oblivious as Margaret nodded, her appetite gone. The sun set fully now, string lights twinkling like stars overhead, but the magic felt tainted. Victor watched from afar, his phone buzzing with alerts. Perhaps those industry whispers about Hayes innovations gaining traction. Margaret's resolve cracked further, the high stakes reveal hovering like a storm cloud over the vineyard. One more push and it might all come crashing down. As dinner plates were cleared away under the twinkling string lights, the reception tent filled with the clatter of silverware and the low hum of conversations resuming. The jazz band switched to an upbeat tempo, encouraging folks to hit the dance floor, but Margaret stayed put at her table, nursing a glass of water to steady her nerves. The vineyard's evening breeze carried hints of earth and wine barrels, cooling the flush from her cheeks, but the sting from the toasts lingered like a bad aftertaste. Guests were still shooting her those pitying glances, whispering about that poor mum with her cute hobby, amplified by the latest buzz on their phones, LinkedIn threads blowing up about ageism, lawsuits in tech firms, viral tweets from women execs calling out the silver ceiling. Margaret caught snippets. Did you see that Forbes piece? Boomers are fighting back with AI startups. Total game changer. Ironic, she thought, her own tool at the heart of those trends, spotting biases before they tanked companies like Nexus, but revealing it now? No, not yet. She'd endure for Olivia's sake, even as the hurt festered. Dessert arrived on elegant platters, decadent chocolate lava cakes oozing warm ganache, paired with fresh berries and dollops of whipped cream that looked straight out of a foodie Instagram post. Margaret poked at hers with a fork, her appetite long gone when a shadow fell over her plate. She looked up to see Victor Lang, Tyler's boss at Nexus Finance, pulling out the chair beside her with a polite smile. He was a sharp-dressed guy in his late 50s, salt and pepper hair slicked back, exuding that Bay Area venture capitalist vibe. Expensive watch, casual blazer over a crisp shirt, the kind who closed deals over golf swings. Mind if I join you, Mrs. Hayes? He asked, his voice smooth like aged bourbon. I'm Victor, Tyler's supervisor. We've crossed paths in the crowd, but I wanted to say hello properly. Margaret nodded, forcing a welcoming grin despite the knot in her stomach. Of course, Mr. Lang. Call me Margaret. Lovely wedding, isn't it? He settled in, forking into his own dessert as the band played a soft cover of Fly Me to the Moon. Victor wasn't one for small talk. He dove right in, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Tyler mentioned you're into some data work down in Austin. Sounds intriguing in this economy. What kind of hobbies we talking? Spreadsheets for fun or something more? There was a genuine curiosity in his tone, not the condescension she'd endured all evening. Margaret hesitated, her mind flashing to the secrecy she'd maintained, the anonymous acquisitions, the AI quietly powering Nexus's analytics without a name attached. But after the public roasting, a small part of her wanted to test the waters. Oh, nothing too flashy, she said modestly, sipping her water. I tinker with AI for financial data, optimizing risks, spotting biases in markets and hiring. Keeps me sharp after getting the boot from my old Wall Street gig. Victor's eyebrows shot up, his fork pausing mid-air. Biases? That's hot right now. Our team's been leaning on this killer algorithm for exactly that. Predicting shifts like the 2024 empowerment wave. You know, women reclaiming tech spaces, viral stories everywhere on TikTok and LinkedIn about late bloomers flipping ageism on its head. Reports from Deloitte and McKinsey are all over it. Female-led fintech booming, biases costing companies billions if ignored. He leaned in closer, probing like a shark scenting blood. What kind of data hobbies get you into that? Sounds pro-level. Margaret felt a thrill mixed with caution. Here was someone who might actually get it. She dropped a subtle hint, her voice steady. Well, I've built a tool that crunches petabytes, forecasting those exact trends, helps mid-sized banks scale without the pitfalls, acquired a few firms along the way to integrate it deeper. The change in Victor's expression was subtle at first, a flicker in his eyes like puzzle pieces clicking. He set his fork down slowly, wiping his mouth with a napkin as the jazz saxophone wailed in the background. Acquired firms in fintech. His tone sharpened, curiosity turning to intensity. Margaret nodded, keeping it vague but truthful. 4 so far, including one that's familiar in analytics circles. Keeps things stealthy. No big splash. Victor's face paled slightly under the tent lights, his mind visibly racing. He pulled out his phone, scrolling quickly, perhaps checking those industry whispers he'd seen popping up in his feeds. Emails from Nexus praising the mystery AI that had boosted their quarterlies. Hayes Innovations, he muttered under his breath, the name hitting him like a thunderclap. You're the anonymous genius behind it? The one fueling our edge at Nexus, spotting those bias trends before they bite us? Margaret's heart skipped, the revelation teetering on the edge. She hadn't planned to go this far, but after the humiliation, the words slipped out. Guilty as charged, but let's keep it between us. It's Olivia's night. Victor stared, stunned, his dessert forgotten. Holy cow, Margaret. We've been singing praises for that AI internally. It's why Tyler's team crushed their targets. And the trends it's predicting, spot on with the viral 2024 wave, women over 50 launching empires, stories exploding on podcasts like How I Built This. You're not dabbling, you're owning the space. He shook his head in disbelief, glancing around the tent where guests were still chuckling about the hobbyist mum from the toasts. The power dynamic flipped in that moment, Victor's respect dawning like the Napa sunset earlier. But Victor, ever the opportunist with a flair for drama, honed from boardroom battles and TEDx stages, wasn't one to let a bombshell sit quiet. His eyes lit up, a mix of awe and indignation. This is nuts. After those toasts, people treating you like some Etsy crafter when you're the powerhouse behind half the fintech tools in this room? He stood abruptly, grabbing the microphone from the MC's stand nearby as the band rapped a song. The crowd hushed, expecting another light-hearted speech. Hold up, everyone, Victor boomed, his voice echoing over the speakers, cutting through the chatter like a knife. I've just uncovered something that'll blow your minds. Our hobbyist mum here, the mother of the bride, isn't playing around with data for fun. She's the mastermind behind Hayes Innovations, the AI juggernaut owning stakes in firms like Nexus and powering the trends we're all chasing. Gasps rippled through the tent, forks clattering onto plates. Olivia froze mid-sip, her flute hovering, face draining of colour. Tyler's jaw dropped, his chair scraping back as he stared at Margaret. The revelation hung in the air, flipping the evening on its head, the high-stakes intensity building as eyes turned to her. The unassuming widow now unveiled as the room's true boss. But this was just the start. The real twist was yet to unfold. The tent erupted into a cacophony of gasps and murmurs, like a summer storm breaking over the vineyard. Forks clattered against plates, chairs scraped back as guests craned their necks, eyes wide and darting between Victor at the mic and Margaret still seated at her table. Her dessert half eaten and forgotten. The string lights overhead swayed gently in the breeze, casting flickering shadows that made the scene feel even more surreal. like a plot twist in one of those Hallmark movies gone off the rails. Olivia stood frozen mid-stride on the dance floor, her champagne flute slipping from her fingers and shattering on the wooden planks with a sharp crack that cut through the noise. Tyler bolted up from his seat, his face a mask of pure shock, mouth agape like he'd just been hit with a curveball in the ninth inning. "What the?" he stammered, his voice lost in the growing buzz. Whispers spread like wildfire. Did he say she owns Nexus? Hayes Innovations? That's the AI everyone's raving about. A few tech bros pulled out their phones, frantically Googling, their screens glowing in the dimming light. Victor, microphone still in hand, wasn't done dropping bombs. He paced a step or two, his venture capitalist charisma kicking into high gear like he was pitching to a room of investors rather than wedding guests. "Let me lay it out for you folks," he boomed, his voice steady and commanding. "Nexus Finance, that's hers now. Acquired last quarter in a stealth deal that had our board scrambling. And get this, her AI isn't some backyard hobby. It's the beast predicting the next big shifts in the market. You know those viral stories blowing up everywhere? The 2024 empowerment wave, women over 50 reclaiming tech, turning ageism into ammunition? Her tools at the forefront, spotting biases in hiring and investments before they tank portfolios. Deloitte reports, McKinsey white papers, they're all citing trends her code forecasted first. Half the execs in this tent? Yeah, many of you work for companies tied to her portfolio. Your paychecks, your promotions, they trace back to this hobbyist mum you've been chuckling at all night." Chaos truly erupted then. A wave of stunned silence gave way to a roar of reactions, gasps turning to exclamations, people turning to their neighbors with "No way," and "I had no idea." One of Tyler's colleagues, a young analyst with a man bun and a craft beer in hand, nearly choked on his sip, sputtering, "Wait, she's our boss's boss?" Another guest, an aunt from the groom's side who'd earlier patted Margaret's hand with that condescending "good for you," now looked like she'd swallowed a lemon, her face paling as she whispered to her husband. The jazz band faltered, the sax player missing a note before the MC waved them to pause entirely. Olivia's bridesmaids clustered around her, one fanning her face with a napkin as if she might faint. Tyler weaved through the crowd toward Margaret, his tie askew, eyes bulging. "Mom, is this for real? Hayes Innovations, that's you? But you drive a Subaru. You knit scarves." Margaret sat there amid the whirlwind, her emotions surging like a tidal wave, from the raw hurt of the evening's mockery to a triumphant relief that washed over her like cool rain after a drought. She felt vindicated, a leader emerging from the shadows, her quiet empire finally in the spotlight. But it wasn't glee, it was a profound release, her hands steady now as she met the stairs. "Yes, Tyler," she said softly, though her voice carried in the hushed tent. "It's me. I've been building this for 2 years, since the layoff, since losing Tom. Kept it low-key because, well, family comes first." Victor nodded approvingly from the stage, handing the mic back to the MC but staying put, his arms crossed like a proud ally. Olivia, though, crumbled visibly. Her radiant bride glow vanished, replaced by a pallor that made her look like a ghost in white lace. She pushed through the bridesmaids, her heels clicking unsteadily on the floor until she reached Margaret's table. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, all eyes on the unfolding drama. "Mom," Olivia whispered, her voice cracking, barely audible over the murmurs. Tears welled up, smudging her mascara as she gripped the table edge. Tyler arrived beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist, but his own face was a storm of awe and regret. condescension melting into something like reverence. We had no clue, he muttered, rubbing his neck. All those times I mansplained tech to you, God, I feel like a total jerk. In that charged moment, as the vineyard breeze rustled the tent flaps, Olivia couldn't hold it in. She pulled Margaret aside to a quieter corner near the olive trees, away from the prying eyes, but still within earshot of a few lingering guests. Tears streamed now, her perfect makeup ruined. Mum, why? Why didn't you say anything? But before Margaret could respond, Olivia blurted it out, a private twist that hit like a gut punch, raw and unexpected. I was jealous, okay? All those mumpreneur stories flooding my feed, women your age killing it in business, going viral on TikTok and LinkedIn with their comebacks. I felt stuck in my marketing gig, pitching dumb campaigns while you were out there soaring. I lashed out because it made me feel small. Pathetic, right? Mocking you to hide how inadequate I felt. Her voice broke, shoulders shaking as she hugged herself. Margaret's heart twisted, triumph mingling with sadness. She pulled Olivia into a hug, the lace of her gown scratching softly against Margaret's dress. Honey, I never wanted this to come out like a spectacle, she whispered, her own eyes misty. Tyler hovered nearby, his awe deepening into genuine remorse, muttering apologies like a mantra. The family reckoning unfolded raw and real, emotions whirling in a cathartic storm. Regret from Olivia's vulnerability, surprise rippling through the guests, and Margaret's relief blooming into something stronger. But as whispers grew, guests frantically checking their phones for Hayes Innovations news, the intensity built. What would come next in this unexpected spotlight? The night was far from over, the emotional high wire taut and trembling. The wedding night's chaos lingered like a hangover, the vineyard tent emptying under a starlit Napa sky as guests whispered their goodbyes, stealing glances at Margaret like she'd sprouted a halo. Or horns. Olivia and Tyler's honeymoon to Hawaii the next morning was a blur of awkward hugs and tear-streaked makeup, the newlyweds boarding their flight with promises to talk soon. Margaret flew back to Boston alone, the plane's hum a backdrop to her swirling thoughts. Relief mixed with the ache of exposed wounds. The revelation had flipped the script. But healing, that wouldn't come easy. Back in her Back Bay brownstone, she unpacked her suitcase amid the familiar creak of floors and the faint scent of lavender, staring at her phone as texts poured in. Apologies from guests who'd mocked her, LinkedIn connection requests from Tyler's colleagues, even a viral tweet thread about the wedding bombshell that had nigh mumpreneur trending overnight. Stories like hers were exploding, women over 50 sharing comeback tales on podcasts, and Forbes echoing the empowerment wave her AI had predicted. But for Margaret, it was personal now. The family mess needed unpacking, and fast. A week later, the therapy session started in a cozy office in downtown Boston, overlooking the bustling common where joggers dodged pigeons and food trucks hawked lobster rolls. Dr. Ellis, a no-nonsense therapist in her 50s with a warm smile and a penchant for herbal tea, welcomed them into her space, plush couches arranged in a circle, tissues at the ready, and a whiteboard for jotting down feelings maps. Margaret sat straight-backed in her armchair, Olivia across from her fidgeting with her wedding ring, Tyler beside his wife looking like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. The air was thick with unspoken regrets, the hum of the city traffic, outside a distant reminder that life marched on. Let's start with the wedding, Dr. Ellis prompted gently, her pen poised over a notepad. Olivia, you mentioned on the intake form that the revelation hit hard. Walk us through it. Olivia's composure cracked almost immediately, her eyes welling up as she twisted a tissue in her hands. God, Mum, I'm so sorry, she sobbed, her voice raw like she'd been holding it in for days. All those barbs, the toast, I was such a bitch. But it wasn't just me being mean. I was scared, terrified, really. Seeing all those trending stories online, late bloomers like that woman on TikTok who started a fashion line at 62, or the exec on LinkedIn who pivoted after a divorce and built a fortune. They made me feel like I was falling behind in my own career, stuck pitching ads for sneakers while you were out there grinding, building something huge after Dad's mess. I feared I'd never match your grit, so I mocked it to make myself feel better. Pathetic, right? I turned my envy into cruelty. Tears streamed down her face, smudging the remnants of her honeymoon tan. Tyler reached for her hand, but his own eyes were misty, the room heavy with the weight of her confession. Margaret felt a pang in her chest, a mother's instinct to comfort clashing with the hurt she'd buried. She leaned forward, her voice soft but steady. Honey, I get it. Those stories got to me too. They fueled me after the layoff. After Tom's affair and heart attack left me reeling, but hearing you say it, it stings. I kept quiet because I didn't want to steal your thunder, but maybe I should have shared sooner. Dr. Ellis nodded encouragingly, jotting notes. That's progress, acknowledging the envy amid the trends. Olivia, those viral tales of empowerment, they're inspiring, but they can breed comparison. Let's unpack how that played into your dynamic. Tyler cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his seat like he was in a boardroom meeting gone sideways. I owe you big time too, Mum, he said, his usual cocky tone humbled, eyes fixed on the floor. All that mansplaining about tech trends? What a dope! Turns out my promotions at Nexus, crushing those targets, were thanks to your AI. The tool spotting biases, predicting that 2024 wave of women-led startups, it saved our bacon multiple times. I treated you like a rookie when you're the real boss. Hell, my job security's tied to your vision now. He chuckled weakly, rubbing his neck. From now on, I'm pitching ideas humbly, if you'll have them. Like, what if we integrated more user feedback loops? But only if it fits your empire. Margaret smiled faintly, a warmth spreading through her. The condescension replaced by respect felt like balm on old wounds. The session dug deeper, unpacking the mess layer by layer. Dr. Ellis guided them through exercises, role-playing the toasts, mapping out timelines of dismissals back to Tom's era. See how patterns repeat? She said, circling words on the whiteboard like underestimated and grief-fueled. Olivia opened up more, admitting how Tom's charm had set a bar she chased, dismissing Margaret's quiet strength as old school. Tyler shared his own insecurities, feeling like a mid-level grunt in a cutthroat industry, projecting onto Margaret to feel superior. Shared vulnerabilities emerged like buried treasure. Margaret confessed her isolation in Austin, the late nights coding to fill the void left by loss. I built Hayes Innovations from pain, she said, voice trembling for the first time. But hiding it, that was my mistake too. Hugs followed tears, the room shifting from tension to tentative mending, like stitching a torn quilt. By the end of that first session, as they stepped out into the crisp Boston air, leaves crunching underfoot, the scent of roasted nuts from a street vendor wafting by, family bonds felt a tad stronger. Olivia linked arms with Margaret on the walk to the tea station, Tyler trailing with coffee cups in hand. We'll keep coming, Olivia promised, her eyes red but resolute. I want to make this right. Tyler nodded, already brainstorming humble pitches over his latte. Margaret felt a quiet shift, empowerment settling in, forgiveness budding like spring after a harsh winter. But the journey was just starting, deeper healing waited in the weeks ahead. Ties strengthening over shared coffee and candid talks. What new horizons might emerge from this mended foundation? As the therapy sessions stretched into weeks, turning into a routine as familiar as Margaret's morning coffee runs in Boston, the family's raw edges began to soften like well-worn denim. Dr. Ellis's office became a safe harbour, where tears gave way to laughter over shared memories. Olivia, recounting childhood stories of Margaret's late-night work calls, Tyler admitting his tech bravado was just a front for his own mid-career jitters. Bonds mended slowly, stitch by stitch, with homework assignments like gratitude journals that had them texting each other random thanks. Appreciate you covering that band for the wedding. Mum, turns out it was from your empire. From Olivia? Or thanks for the AI tips. Blew my boss away. From Tyler. Margaret felt the shift in her bones, forgiveness blooming not as a grand gesture, but in quiet moments, like when Olivia called just to chat about a bad day at work. No sarcasm in sight. The empowerment wave they discussed in therapy, those viral stories of women flipping scripts, started feeling less like distant inspiration and more like their own roadmap. Back in Austin, Margaret dove headfirst into her work at Hayes Innovations, the co-working space buzzing with energy that matched her renewed fire. The Texas sun baked the streets outside, food trucks slinging tacos and barbecue under live oaks, but inside she was laser-focused. Her AI tool was hitting new highs, forecasting trends with eerie accuracy, like the spike in female-led ventures amid 2024's buzz on platforms like LinkedIn and TikTok. Reports from outfits like McKinsey were citing similar shifts. Women over 50 driving innovation, turning ageism into opportunity. Margaret's portfolio swelled, acquisitions rolling in, but the real thrill came when Olivia texted one evening, "Mum, what if we teamed up? Your AI plus my marketing chops, something to fight that silver ceiling crap." It was an olive branch wrapped in ambition, and Margaret jumped on it. They brainstormed over Zoom calls, Olivia in her Boston loft with a messy bun and coffee mug, Tyler chiming in from the couch with humble suggestions like add a user dashboard for real-time bias alerts. The project took shape, an anti-ageism AI app called Silver Surge, designed to scan corporate data for hidden biases in hiring and promotions, offering fixes inspired by those trending tales of late bloomers. Margaret coded the core algorithms in her Austin setup, screens glowing late into the night with the distant twang of country music from nearby bars. Olivia handled the branding, slick interfaces, catchy taglines like flip the script on ageism, drawing from her ad world savvy. "This is us turning pain into purpose," Olivia said during one call, her voice thick with emotion. "All those viral stories I envied, we're making our own." Tyler pitched in too, now treating Margaret like the boss she was, suggesting integrations with Nexus's systems. What if we pull in social media, sentiment data, track those my mumpreneur hashtags in real time? His awe had evolved into alliance, his promotions secure but his respect earned anew. The collaboration bridged the miles, emails flying with wireframes and beta tests, laughter echoing over glitchy video feeds. For Margaret, it was catharsis, her empire expanding not just in dollars but in family ties. At 65, Margaret found herself reflecting more deeply on the journey, especially during those quiet Austin sunsets. She'd take evening walks along Ladybird Lake, the water shimmering gold as joggers and cyclists zipped by, the skyline silhouetted against a fiery sky. One such evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the clouds in pinks and oranges, she paused on a bench, the warm breeze rustling palm fronds overhead. Memories flooded back, the Wall Street pink slip that felt like a death sentence, Tom's betrayal and sudden heart attack, leaving her adrift in widowhood, the family digs that chipped away at her spirit. But now, she felt unbreakable like tempered steel forged in fire. "I did it," she whispered to the fading light, a smile creeping across her face. The empowerment she'd built wasn't just code and acquisitions. It was reclaiming her voice, proving that second acts could outshine the first. Those viral stories that once fueled her resolve now mirrored her life, shared in podcasts and articles where women like her cheered each other on. The real capstone came during a reconciliatory family dinner back in Boston, months after the wedding dust had settled. Olivia hosted in her Brookline home, the table set with candles flickering like hopeful stars. Aromas of roasted chicken and garlic mashed potatoes filling the air, comfort food to match the mending hearts. Tyler uncorked a bottle of Napa Pinot, a nod to the venue where it all exploded, pouring glasses with a grin. "To new beginnings," he toasted, his voice steady, eyes meeting Margaret's with genuine warmth. Olivia raised her glass next, her hand steady now, no trace of the bride's earlier pallor. "Mum, to you, the powerhouse I should have celebrated from day one. Working on Silver Surge with you, it's inspired me more than any trend. You've shown me grit isn't about age, it's about heart." Tears glistened, but they were happy ones, the room alive with clinks and soft laughter. Margaret clinked last, her emotions settling into a wise contentment, forgiveness wrapping around them like a cozy blanket. "To second chances," she said, her voice rich with warmth, and the sweet sting of underestimation. "It pushes us to prove 'em wrong." They dug in, conversation flowing easy, shop talk about the app's launch, light-hearted jabs at Tyler's old mansplaining days, plans for a family trip to Austin. The division that once fractured them had healed into unity, delivering an emotional payoff of hope and redemption. Margaret glanced around the table, her family whole again, stronger for the cracks. At 65, she'd learned the ultimate lesson. Life's best chapters often start when others think yours is done. And that's the end of our story, folks. If Margaret's journey hit home for you, proving it's never too late to flip the script, hit that like button, share it with a friend who's chasing their own dreams, and subscribe to the Ageless Bold Stories channel for more tales of resilience and reinvention. Who knows? Your story might be next. Thanks for joining me. Keep shining out there.